I suspect men would also, who are struggling, yes, they wanna do the work, but they probably also don't wanna deny perhaps some more positive elements of the masculine, while how can one do the work, acknowledge the sort of negative and destructive forms of the masculine, while honoring the sort of more positive elements. What are those? Because I think that's sort of
the essence of the masculine is the generative impulse, the impulse to quicken life. The essential feminine posture is to bear life and bring it forward. These have been lost. These differences have been lost. But that's but I think fundamentally that's the reason that so many men are impotent today, requiring mechanical supports like Viagra and Cialis to get it up, because they're non-generative. Non-generative males are running the show today. So the most positive aspect of being a male, which is the dark generative impulse to quicken life, is totally absent. And it's a lucky man who is gifted, brought into a family where they nourish and cherish it. Usually, boys, put those guns down, you'll be arrested by the police, 3 years old or something like that. And don't you dare, we're not going to have you, they're so aggressive, put that stick down, stop fighting, apologize to each other. They just don't know. When little boys fight, they become the best of friends afterwards. Why? So it's like elephants. They test each other's strength, and if they're equal, they've got a friend. But that's so absent today. And I'd say, on the other hand, a lot of older men are sort of getting onto that and sort of saying we've got to bring our boys up differently. We can't bring our boys up taking away every aggressive impulse. Can't use that knife. You could stab somebody, but you can also butter bread with it. So get rid of the whole thing. There's no discernment anymore. Yes, a penis can be used to rape a woman, absolutely. But what else? What else? Make children? Okay. What else? What else can the phallic power be? What other contribution can phallic power make? The generative power makes a culture, for example. What about that? I remember seeing a documentary of a physicist, and he was writing his equations up on the board, and he turned to face the audience, and I looked in his eyes, and I said, there it is. There's the generative impulse. He's penetrating the darkness with his mind. That's phallic. And he's igniting the students with his enthusiasm. He's really into this. That's the phallic power. That's the generative power working at the level of the mind. It can work at many different levels. As a principle or as a spiritual power, it's just trashed. So a man feels less than a man, and then they fall prey to. Because if you can't learn to stand your own ground in the face of the dark feminine with your dark masculine, she'll eat you up. She'll become a spider. And away you go. And that's what's happening to a lot of men, unfortunately. Because the only way to meet the goddess is on equal grounds, If you mess with me, we'll mess with each other, but we're equal. And that's where love and respect can come between two equal partners, at the human level and at the archetypal level. For example, in the Greek pantheon, the gods and goddesses were quite equal. When they engaged each other, it was on equal ground. So the goddesses were not less than the gods. And that can carry on through the human beings. But in order to respect the feminine, for example, we really have to know our own feminine within. Then we'll be able to form a bridge to the real woman that we're engaged with, and sort of, oh, she's doing that. It's not that she's against me in some way or wants to put me down. She's saying what's feminine, well, a very feminine thing to say. And I hadn't got it before, but now I get it. I can respect it. And vice versa. That'd be a new kind of man. To be able to stand fully in his manhood, facing a woman fully in her womanhood, as equals.
Fully in his manhood, having realized his feminine qualities, his feminine qualities as well, and
exactly.
And vice versa for her.
Exactly. Exactly. That's a new definition of a man is struggling to come forward, and that is that image of androgyny that we talked about the other day. Whereas a man who has integrated the feminine within is very definitely a different kind of man. In our culture, a man is a man after he's crushed the inner feminine aspects in himself, absolutely crushed them, and therefore treats women accordingly, treats women and animals and nature accordingly, or anything other than the rational mind, you might say, or the enlightened mind. All of that got crushed. Mysticism, the occult, superstition, that sort of stuff, demeaning. And a man has to find a new relationship to all of that within himself. And there's a very famous example of that. Perhaps we might pause after this.
Sure.
But it's called the case of Schreber. He was a patient that Freud came across. I don't think Freud saw him, but he researched the case. Schreber was a judge, a high court judge in, I'm not sure what country it was, let's say Germany. And he had the typical paranoid structure of those in power, fearful of anything that he can't control and keep and master. So he was a powerful judge, and he had a complete psychotic breakdown and was hospitalized, and he flipped into what was a masochistic position, what he wanted, and the psychiatric attendants, being somewhat sadistic, gladly obliged, he wanted to be hurt. In alchemical terms, it's called the mortificatio, mortification of the body, which is a necessary process of attunement to the feminine within. But that's another story. It's a big story. But he wanted them to nearly drown him in the bath. He wanted them to slap him, to abuse him, and they did. It went on and on and on. Alchemically, that's the mortificatio, mortification of the body, and that opened him up to his feminine self that he had never experienced. And so that was the goal of the mortification, to open up to those feminine qualities that we've despised, that the paranoid structure despises. He was finally got through it all, cured, and what he next did in life, he went out and did good works. He served people, and he was a much more humble, forgiving, loving man, having gone through that. It's an example of a very hardened patriarchal structure breaking down and discovering the feminine within, and wanting to experience that fully, which means you get treated, you suffer, and you're passive, and you're open to being hurt, and you want it, it's erotic. All of that is the territory awaiting a man for whom the old masculine structure breaks down. Today, a very big industry is the B&D industry. And from a depth psychological view, what men are doing is entering into a posture of submission to the dominant woman. And they want it. They want to be slapped on the bum until they have an orgasm or whatever it is. Or put in leather or pierced through the breast and hung from the ceiling. It's really quite extreme, but the depth psychology of it is very clear, that they're men who are wanting to undergo the same mortificario process that Schreber did in order to produce a different kind of man at the end. An integration of the feminine. So that's one way to do it, of course. But it's not, the other way is a psychological way, and typically men who enter psychoanalysis with that patriarchal structure that we all share, typically because depth psychology is fundamentally an anima psychology, they're introduced to the anima through their dreams, and that will do the work of mortificario. Just like my dream of the figure on the slab teaching me about suffering. That's initiatory suffering. I went under, and that's at the hands of the anima, or the anima mother, and that's so it can be a psychological process, but no less real for that.